I'd like to call the meeting to order of the May 9th work session. It's 4 p.m. and the first thing on our agenda is the welcome, invocation, and pledge, and I think Nancy Roach is going to do that for us today.
Please stand. Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day and for the abundance of rain that you have sent us this spring to nourish our beautiful earth. Please grant us the wisdom to make the right decisions for the students of Forsyth County. Many times we feel unsettled, especially when there is some haziness in our hearts about the course we should take. We do not, after all, want to make the wrong decision, but unfortunately what is right for some is the wrong decisions for others. We pray that you will guide our thoughts when we are searching through the options and help us to be patient as the process is unfolding. Thank you for your support and guidance. We also pray for all those who are serving in the military, and please comfort and bless all those who are suffering. We ask this in your name. Amen. Please salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, you have before you an agenda. Do I have a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second. A motion by Tom and a second by Kristen. All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, and first we have the presentation and discussion items. Midway Elementary School enrollment relief. Mr. Joey Perkle.
Good afternoon. I want to present to you a plan to relieve Midway Elementary School for this upcoming 2013-14 school year. You as a board have had some discussion about this in the past, and so we have a plan that we'd like to present to you tonight for some relief for Midway, and looking at why we are talking about this now, of course, to reduce the need for funding for trailers at Midway. Also with the discussion that we've had over the past 3 weeks, or even 3 months, I guess I should say, regarding about the increase in some of the high density residential areas and construction that's kind of taking back up in that area and that attendance zone. And also some discussion regarding funding for any new elementary schools, and I know we've had some discussion about that. So I'd like to present the plan. As you can see, Midway's current enrollment is 914. This projection, their projected enrollment is 963 with Big Creek. And this plan involves really these 3 schools, Midway, Big Creek, and Vickery Creek Elementary. The projected enrollment for Big Creek was at 667 and Vickery Creek at 1,005. What we are proposing is relatively simple. There are 3 areas that we are proposing to move students out of Midway. The first area moves a total of 113 students into Big Creek. Out of this number, there are 12 of those would be rising 5th graders with 4 siblings. And the second area that we have looked at would move 36 students from Midway into Vickery Creek Elementary School, with 7 of those being rising 5th graders and 4 siblings. And the third area would move 34 students from Midway into the Vickery Creek Elementary School attendance zone with 8 5th graders and 3 siblings. And the reason I mentioned, of course, the 5th graders and the siblings, as you know, in the past when we've redistricted, we've allowed rising 5th graders to stay to finish that one last year. And any siblings that they have, we've granted them that 1 year, or we would grant them to stay for 1 year and then move to their redistricted school through the all of those through the out-of-district process.
So that is how we've done it in the past? We've
Yes.
let siblings stay for that 1 year? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't have them in 2 schools, but then
Right.
they have to move.
Then they have to move the
Right.
next year. Okay.
Okay, to talk about the areas, Area 1, which is, as I said, is 113 students. This area is the area from Union Hill, McGinnis Ferry, and McFarland Road. And I'm going to switch over to the map so you can see that. So you can see down at the bottom, and you can probably maybe see it better on your screen if I can get it to stop. So you can see that's the area down at the bottom. That is the, again, the Union Hill Road, McGinnis Ferry, McFarland Road. There's 113 students. You can see that area to the right that's a purple color, shaded almost a bluish purple. That's all industrial area, so there are no kids obviously living in that area. So that's kind of why that looks like that. The second area, which is up at the top on the far left, that area to Vickery Creek Elementary, that's the Holbrook Campground Road area. There are 36 students there. And then area 3 is to the right. That's the Majors Road, Castleberry Road section, and there are 34 students in that area. I'm going to switch back and then we'll come back if you need to. Okay, so you can get a good idea. This slide kind of shows you all three areas together, so you can see if we if you're looking at area 1 with taking 113 students from Midway, that brings Midway's projected enrollment to 850. So it's bringing it from 963 to 850. It brings Big Creek's projected enrollment from 667 to 780, and you can see what their building capacity is. The second area, and these are just each area individually, the second area brings Midway's projected enrollment to, just moving that area along, to 927. And Vickery Creek, it brings their projected enrollment to 1041. And the third area, 929 for Midway and 1039 for Vickery Creek Elementary. So that kind of gives you a good idea. You can see each area individually. Then this slide will show you if you take all three areas together. So if you take all of those areas together and move all three of those to Big Creek, the one to Big Creek and the two to Vickery Creek, that brings Midway's projected enrollment to 780. And it brings Vickery Creek Elementary to 1075, which is slightly over capacity, but not a lot. And Big Creek to 780, which is still under capacity.
And that's slightly over Vickery Creek, would not need any trailers because it's just so close to their
Right.
capacity.
Right. And of course, that doesn't include the 27 rising fifth graders plus their siblings. I think if you take all those, I think the total of that number was like 38, I believe.
Right.
So you could subtract, you'd subtract.
If you left them, you could take them back
right.
off
But you're only
others.
talking about
Right.
38 students if they all took advantage and stayed.
Mhm. But they've got to furnish their own transportation.
They
so
do.
that
They would
could
have
be yeah.
Yes, they would have to furnish their own transportation and complete the out-of-district form and go through
Joey,
that
the
process.
ones that are moving, are they going to the middle school?
No.
Would they be going to the same middle school they
Have
would
to
be if they
subtract.
stayed in Midway?
Yes, ma'am. If
So-
the middle and high school feeder pattern does not change.
Okay.
And
For all
example,
three areas, it doesn't change.
right. For example,
That's good.
the students going to Big Creek, the students at Midway that would go to Big Creek, those students would still go to Piney Grove Middle and South High School.
Okay.
The students that would go to Vickery Creek, if they stay in Midway, they're going to go to Vickery Creek Middle and West. But if they go to Vickery Creek, they're still going to go to Vickery Creek Middle and West.
Okay, all right, so that doesn't affect
It
that.
did not affect that.
And we're just talking about a 2-year period of time.
Right. Now, the timeline in the communication plan, we, of course, presenting you the proposal so that you can have time to look at it and discuss it or think about it. What we plan to do with in communicating this is on May the 10th, tomorrow, we would like to send emails and letters to parents in all three of these areas just to communicate that this has been presented. And this is a proposal, and kind of inform them of what the timeline is. Also inform them that they will be able to and have the option to provide online input through a survey through May the 15th. And they will also be given, we will inform them about the option for out of district if they're a rising fifth grader or if they're a sibling of a rising fifth grader, and explain to them the process, the out of district process they would need to go through to take advantage of that. And send letters to all the Midway Vicar Creek Elementary as well as the Big Creek parents from the principal. Jennifer has been working with the principals on how to communicate this, and so that they're all consistent. And then we, of course, would post on the district and school website, social media, etc. May the 16th, which is next Thursday, at your regular board meeting, we would ask that you approve the 13-14 redistricting plan. The following day, on the 17th, we would send emails to the parents of the students that are going to be moved to let them know this was the final decision. Your child will be attending this school next year, and so that we inform them on the 17th of that. And then they will have until May the 31st to submit their out-of-district request. I know it's kind of a tight timeline, but we need to know this information because obviously it will affect staffing and those kinds of things. So Dr. Norton's kind of in limbo and sitting on ready, waiting on us to have all of this information and process that, so she'll know then how and where to move staff accordingly.
I would like to have some time, and if the rest of the board doesn't want to do this, it's fine. But if we came at 5 or 5:30 before the May 16th meeting and let parents come, and if they have any questions that we could answer them. Because this is so quick, I just hate to, we talked about it, they asked for this when they appeared before us last month, but just to reach out to them for their input. I know that we're doing all the letters and we're doing online, but
Well, public participation
I
is
think
during the regular
I
meeting,
know it
right?
is.
So where you're going to do that?
The
Well-
retirement thing is next
that's
Thursday.
right.
Before
can't do
that, and
that.
it's learning before that, so it's a real busy day.
I mean,
so we'd have to do it in participation time, but
or we
I
could
just
do
think
it
we need to
early
allow
in
them to
the week,
speak.
couldn't we?
Well, public participation is the time when they can speak,
But we only
right?
have 30
Do they-
minutes, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
No,
no,
we can
it's, no, we don't.
have
We
it as
don't,
long
we
as
don't
we-
have it. We
You
can
have it as long
we
as they
want.
sign up.
We can
Okay.
have, we can have
Okay,
2
Well,
hours
maybe we
if
could
we
be
felt like we
flexible on the
needed it.
sign up for this case.
yeah, that's what
I'm
I'm
sorry.
Could we be
saying.
flexible on the signing up in this situation?
That was the other thing, Kristen, too. I didn't think we needed to have them have
Well, if
to.
they come that
Well,
night,
if we
they
have
can
it as
sign
it's
up
on
that night.
agenda.
If we had it as an agenda item,
Then they can
not just
speak.
but specifically for this, but, speaking to
They
that
can
point.
speak, that's right. Okay, good.
Well, and I think, and we may know more about how to, I guess, gauge that or predict
Mhm.
that when we get input when they go online and
The
provide
surveys.
input, because they'll have an opportunity to do that. So
Mhm.
that hopefully would give us a better idea of, yeah, we're probably going to have 10 people that want to speak, or
Right.
looks like everybody seems to be really fine with the plan. You may have one or two
knows?
people speak.
Mhm.
So
Right.
we may know that more about that when we
Okay.
get the feedback from
Are we
the
going to
online
tell them
survey.
that in the letter or email, that they will have that option to have public participation? Lots of people don't really understand public participation and know
We-
that's available.
We currently have not put that in the letter. We didn't say that in the letter, did we, Jennifer?
What?
We didn't.
Yeah.
I would think you
I
have a
would
lot
feel
of
better.
questions, like, do we get to speak to the board at some time?
Right.
Like normal redistricting works.
Mhm.
Now, how does this leave Midway looking after if we took all 3 areas and did this? It looks like it's still about 143 over capacity.
Yeah, it leaves them, if you're doing all 3 areas, it leaves them at projected enrollment at 780. So, yeah, that's still over capacity. It's not over 44% over capacity,
Right,
obviously.
right.
Well, also understand, we have scheduled in the fall another redistricting where we're going to fix a couple of other elementary school situations. At that time, we've taken an opportunity to look into the future about some further shifts that will leave, and then take another group, perhaps out of Midway, should you elect to do that, once we fill in some of those further southern areas where we've got some places that we've got classroom space.
Okay.
And the numbers will start to shake out even more. The number's
Right.
changing all the time.
Right, yeah.
So.
True.
Do we know of any subdivisions, Kristen, that are going down in that area in Midway?
There's nothing currently in process in that one specific area, but there's rumors of some stuff coming
Like
along.
on Castleberry and all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
I'm good with it. Is everybody good with the communication plan we have in place?
Yep. Thank you for working on this. It's good.
We just want Jennifer to add that they can come to public participation and,
And speak to the board.
okay. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Purple. And next, we have the much-anticipated 2014-19 Facilities Plan update with Tim Emerson.
First slide.
You want maybe your clicker? No, you go.
Okay. I'll take over then. All right, good afternoon. Going to bring you an update on the local facilities plan. Hopefully give you the crash course on how the COPS program, the capital outlay program with the state works as far as how we manipulate the numbers through all this. This is where I keep my cheat sheet. All right. And while we're doing this, bringing you back to the whole beginning, we're required by the state, of course, to do this every 5 years. We're actually doing it in our 4th year because we have to generate our needs to keep current with our earnings back from the state entitlement. Let's see. Yeah, if we don't, then we don't earn as much money. So when we make applications for a future elementary school number 14 and take that money, we don't have the replacement funding coming in at a constant stream. And what else we have?
So in other words, any of the construction that we want to do has to be in our facilities plan in order to get that money back.
That's correct.
Get some money from the state.
Yeah, and the plan, like I said, will also allow us to earn capital improvement money for painting, flooring, the life cycle work, replacing HVAC. As we put that in the plan, we will earn money for that. Not that we necessarily will make applications for those type projects versus new school, new construction. But will help us in earnings, and our maintenance department is going through their life cycle inventory to help us figure out what those items are and help us cost those out. All right. And what it provides us, and you'll see some of this come up in the plan pages coming up, we'll have an inventory of all the existing classrooms. One of the things we do is we'll build a page to tell the state which ones are instructional units. They're used for K2, 3, 5, math, English, and those classes all the way up through the grade lines. We'll have the historical and projected data. You see some of that on the student population trends that the state creates. Same sort of data we work with here. And one of the things you see is also on the explanation and justification page, the current class sizes. As you know, right now we have our limit set for 1,500 elementary school, kind of based on what we got with Sawney Elementary School when we combine those two. 1,200 for middle school and 2,100 for high school. And the high school is kind of set by rolling the Otwell Middle School into Central High School as their west campus. That's how those numbers occurred. We have the additional areas that we're addressing. We'll be working with the safety and security group, help identify areas we need to address in the building to improve our security, access controls through the building. As I noted, we'll have the renovations and modifications for life cycle to address any of the maintenance capital outlay, capital project needs that we have. And those are usually your large items such as roofs, HVAC, those type items. And then, of course, we'll create a plan to talk about additions and or new school, relief schools for our system. All right. Get into some of the forms you start to see as they come through with the State Department. This is the student population trend. Basically what the state does is it takes a look at the last 5 years. It looks at the actual number of changes that have occurred over the last 5 years. As you can see, this plan is from our current plan, which was done in 2010. top line, you see that we were growing at a rate at that time of 2,122 students. And our elementary, middle, and high school, down there in the sort of right-hand column, they're projecting we would grow from 17,600 students to 23,118 elementary, 10,245 middle, and 11,174 high school. The latest update we got as we started to look at our proposed organization, the numbers that they've run shows that we're only going to grow in the year 16-17 now to 22,292 elementary. You can see that's a drop of about 826 elementary school. We've kind of seen that trend happening with looking at our roll-up charts, realizing our elementaries aren't moving as fast. But you'll notice that the increase in the middle and high schools are up there, including the 850 students we're looking at for high school. But these numbers, the 22,292 students, you'll see that appear on one of my next pages coming up as we talk about how we distribute the students into the elementary schools that we have available. All right, catch up with where I'm at. All right, this slide is the fiscal year 2013. This is what our entitlement page looks like. The one thing that we'll note is we had construction needs currently in the plan of about $50,660,000. They take that and they take a look at everybody else in the state. They compare that, and it comes down to item 6, and that shows that we have 2.35% of the need in the state of Georgia for school construction improvements and all that. That earned us about $4.7 million in entitlement for that year. And of course, we did have about $20 million in accumulated. That's the rollover money from previous years in that account. Then the next year is when everything became a regular entitled fund. But at this time, after we had done our reimbursements for Kelly Mill, we went from $50 million down to $44 million by the time we took receipt of our reimbursements. And we are now only earning at a rate of about 1.5% of the total state needs. So we dropped from 2.35% to 1.5%. And this is where we need to move our construction needs value back up to compare to everybody else in the state, so we will earn some more entitlement. Our entitlement is now awarded at a $300 million level. And but out of that $300 million, we only earned $4.5 million versus $4.7 million the previous year. You see at the very bottom, though, we have about $50 million in the bank account, so to speak, with our accumulated earnings. And what happened is we had the accumulated from the previous page plus what we had earned from previous exceptional growth formula rolled into this accumulated account. So at this time, we have about $50 million in the bank. We'll be getting new entitlements in June and hopefully keep building on that available funds for new schools.
But no more exceptional growth.
There's no more exceptional growth. That $100 million exceptional growth was moved to regular to become $300 million to be awarded.
So on the average, Tim, what is the percentage that the state reimburses us? Is it if we build a school for $12 million?
Their formula is they reimburse projects based on their square footage value and cost of project for the brick and mortar concrete building. Doesn't include site work, parking lots, athletic fields. Their formula is 80% is funded by them if you build it for $70 a square foot, versus the real cost of maybe of $100 to $110 a square foot that we build at. Kelly Mill project, it kind of came in about a 50-50 split.
Okay.
So most time we usually see is if we fully fund that school, so if we earn funding from the state for all 70 classrooms for Kelly Mill, then that pays in about $7.5 million, and of course that project is about $15 million.
Right.
Roughly.
Okay.
So obviously on a high school, it would be less because you're saying they don't pay for the ball fields and all the amenities, and an elementary doesn't
That's right.
have that. So-
West Forsyth High School, which we earned entitlement for every classroom we built there. And at the time, it was the largest single pay application that we had ever put together. It was $21 million that they paid for that school. And at that time, it was about a $42–43 million project.
So it
So
was
again-
still about half.
Still about half. So. Kind of walk you through, this is a proposed organization page. I'm not going to show you the current organization. We'll have that updated, and it's going to show you exactly what FTE we earned at this time this year for every school. The one carryover column, you see where it says at the very top, existing IUs. You'll see that we have 1,315 instructional units or classrooms for elementary students in our system. What they do, again, you'll see the 22,291, that was the elementary students that the state is projecting that we're going to have in our system in the next 5 years. So we have to build classrooms for those. So the state thinks we're going to have 1,420 classrooms that the state IUs earned, which means we're about 105 short of where we need to be. So the state will help us build 105 instructional units that will go into funding formula, part of our capital needs request to the state. How much of that money we pull? Well, we already have identified 71 classrooms. We will make an application for elementary 14. So if you look down there where it says Z, future elementary 14, I've taken the projected number of students that the state is projecting, and I've moved them all into elementary 14, and it will earn us 71 classrooms, so they will help fund 71 classrooms. And
How many classrooms is in a typical high school?
typically, we're about 104 to 106 classrooms. Gives us capacity about 20, 25, 2050, those sort of numbers. All right.
Tim, is number 10 Pools Mill? Or is that
No,
Whitlow?
elementary number 10 is a future school. We purchased property on Waldrop Road to be a
Right,
future
Whitlow,
relief for
yeah,
Chestatee, Chattahoochee area.
Got it.
And of course, Reading is property that was donated from the Mashburn Trust for a future school, and they built that subdivision. And of course, we bought Pools Mill back in early
Long time.
2000s, thinking that was how we were going to relieve Matt and Sawney at the time.
Okay.
The other column, and I got some placeholders there of 199. Right now, looking at our current numbers and just saying that they kind of stay steady up the road, we don't expect to pass the state's projection, so I have no local FTE. You'll see this come back up when I get to high school, because what we see for numbers, what I do is look at the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th grades, add 5 years so they become 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th. And look at those numbers compared to what the state projects, and I'm thinking we're going to be about 1,125 more than what the state's, and that's no growth. That is taking our existing students,
Just
moving
moving
them
them
up to
up.
high school. All right.
This is probably too big a question, but how does the state project? I mean, did they do this
Back
for
on that-
every county in the state?
Yes, what they do, let me go back to this page on student trend. You can see they started counting back in 2005 through 2010, and they look at that difference from each year. And at that time, we averaged 2,122 students. So they go in the year 2010-11, add 2,000 students, go to year 2011, add another 2,000
Okay.
students for the next 5 years.
That's it?
That's how they do it. As we said, right now, our numbers, because last year was a very low count, it was about 1,350 students, that our average has dropped to about 1,600 plus students that we're earning a year. I think it's 1,638. But now we're at this year, which appears to be about 2,100 students that we grew this year. It will be recalculated, and it's going to bump that average from 1,650 to about 1,750 students.
So all these school systems that haven't grown at all, this really hurts them.
Yeah, I did a plan review for Clark County about 2 weeks ago. They invite us, different systems, to come review their plan, and they had a grand total of 16 plus kids per year.
Really?
For Clark County, Athens area.
Wow.
So that kind of
You did that
shows
in
the
Dayton.
difference between us to Clark County, Athens.
They're moving to Oconee.
So,
They're all in Oconee. So the difference between what this is and when we have the growth funds that we're not getting anymore, how does that, because that hurt us more than, it's fair across the state, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But it means less money for us as we
That's
grow
right,
faster.
because under the exceptional growth, we were earning about 15 towards 20% some years of the state's $100 million pie.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, we had a somewhat of a windfall from that account
Right.
that has rolled in, you know, from previous ones rolled in and has now become, from that $20 million I'm showing in FY13 to the $49 million FY14 has accumulated and moved into our regular account as
Okay.
accumulated. So we've kept that money, it's just rolled into our regular accumulated funding.
So the 49 million is what we would draw from when we build the next school.
That's
We
right.
just draw that down.
When we make an application for elementary 14, we're going to make an application against this accumulated regular funding
Mm-hmm.
and for 71 classrooms.
Okay.
But that's not just for new construction, that's also for other capital needs, that money?
It can be used for anything that's capital need, and again, the state likes to refer to those more the building systems. So a roof is a roof system for the building, HVAC systems. It does cover a lot of the other stuff with life cycle for painting and flooring replacement, those type things that have to be done. So we can apply for that money to go into an existing school and ask for money to help repaint that school. You get pennies on the dollar compared to things, and we'll talk a little bit more about the cost for additions versus cost of a new construction, how those formulas work.
Okay.
So they don't use the actual number of students. They do that projection, and they don't look back at our actuals except every few
Those are
years?
built, those are built from our FTE each year. They look, you know, they
They
have
look-
their
so they
weighted
change it
ratio
every
of
single
second
year?
month, eighth month,
Okay,
and they look
They
at
change
the
it every
difference
year.
from this year to what happened last year.
okay.
And then, like I said, this year we grew 2,188 students.
So they change it every year?
And last year was 1,600, so we.
Well,
increased
last year was 1,300.
1,300,
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
so we jumped a lot from what we actually grew from 2011-12 to what we grew 2012-13. Went from 13 to 2,100. Most of those numbers, brought that along with me.
Tim, don't you think, given all the construction and zonings that you know are coming up, don't you think we're going to keep going at a decent
Yeah, and,
pace?
you know, that's one of the things I'll go ahead and have already basically bowed out to Candy that my numbers are going to probably be a little low this year based on what I see happening from this year.
Mhm.
Again, my projection is about 1,400 for next year. So if this growth happens again next year, I'm going to come up about 600-700 kids short.
Wow.
So this was
Mm.
like an exceptional year.
And some
Like I
of those
said,
probably go to Midway.
I'm sure they will.
just to tell you how things kind of slid down, we, from 2008 compared to 2007, we grew 1,700. 2009 to 2008, we grew 1,800. Then in 2010, we slipped down to 1,600. And then 2011, we dropped to 1,353. And like I said, in my rough calculation, I don't have eighth month yet, so I had to substitute the seventh month report. But shows that we're at 2,188. And that should bring our average then from what I showed you here was 2122, dropped to 1638. We should bump back up to 1750 in our average. Then those will be carried out in the plan for the next 5 years. So when you see the new plan after June, it'll be using that 1,750 student gain for each year.
Which
So
is
we're
probably
hit-
really low, lower than,
Yeah, I was going to
Lower.
say.
probably
Should
lower
be.
than it will be.
It's
Most,
going to wait, yeah, and because last year was a low number, it's going to take several years for that
Has to
number
get
to roll
bigger,
off.
To roll off and get bigger.
So yeah, if we come back in 4 years, that number disappears, and all of a sudden, we've got 2,000+ students growing a year.
Mhm.
We'll be back at 21, 22, like we were at our heyday.
heyday.
And we're still looking at most of the growth being in middle and high school versus elementary, is what you said earlier, I
Well,
think.
and again, this is going to depend a lot, as Kristen talked about, with some development. If this development
Mhm.
comes in, starts
It's gonna
repopulating
be elementary
the
all over
elementary
again.
schools again,
Exactly.
we'll see those numbers start to rise, and we'll see that little ripple effect go across like we've seen
Before.
moving currently from the middle schools to high school. That's where we saw that 800 student roll up into high schools.
Mhm.
We'll see that little peak start to form and then move on across.
Okay.
And of course, it just depends how fast we grow and how long that growth period keeps going. All right. Here again, and this draft one, just to clarify, this is what we've typically been doing. We take all the extra students that the state says we're going to have in the next 4 to 5 years, and what we do is we apply them to the new school, a relief school for the ones. So of course, the next one we had identified was going to be that middle school number 10. This is the site we talked about, McFarland, Union Hill Road area, to relieve Piney Grove, Victory Creek Middle, and help with some of that relief across the south end as we district. So I've moved 1,025 students in there, earned 64 classrooms, which is able to then be able to help fund those classrooms as we go forward. The balance of them, there's 439 left over that we just put in middle school number 11. But this basically fills up all the schools to the capacity, their threshold point, based on how many instructional units they have. And you see we don't have any needs for any new classrooms at those numbers. We're matched with what the state says we need at Lakeside, at Liberty, all down the line.
Okay.
Okay?
Middle school 11 was over there by West Forsyth High School, is that right or not? Did we buy up property at the same time we bought the high school enough for middle school or not?
No.
I didn't think we
West High
did.
School and middle
Yeah.
school site? No, it's just West High School.
That's what I thought. Okay.
We were kind of anticipating that we would probably need another middle school to kind of fill that void between Victory and Liberty. That's where we had kind of tentatively
Right.
were looking for middle school. But of course, as we had moved things around with Otwell, we didn't feel very sure to go
Right.
down any property over there this time.
Right now, we're on the other side with Riverwatch being so filled, and
So, like
so
I
where do you
said,
go from there?
we
Mhm.
decided not to bet too far ahead on where those numbers were going with what we saw moving back from Victory to Liberty and also back into Otwell as we repopulated Otwell a bit.
Mhm.
I think that covers what I need to show you. The key thing here that you might note is we got minus 96, so we're short 96 classrooms at middle school in the next 4 to 5 years. All right. Now we'll move quickly through the high school, and again, done the same thing. All the schools are basically done at capacity. We pretty well, as close as we could with their chart and how many existing classrooms we had matched their chart. So what I've done is start to distribute those students into future high school number 7 on the south end, because we know with South, West, and Lambert, that'd be our strongest need down at that end of the county at this time. East Forsyth High School, of course, picks up a handful of students. And here's where I talk about, I have 1,125 students based on my roll-up of the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grades to high school, that I'm 1,125 students more than the 12,033 they're projecting currently. So the state has their 12,033 students. I say, let's add another 1,100 that we need to build classrooms for to make everybody fit in the next 5 years. And at that point, we'll earn 105 instructional units from the state to help us with funding on those. And system-wide total, you'll see the minus 306 is what they think the system will need to build new classrooms, be it new schools or additions. And at that time, I'll go on into our draft number 2, which will focus strictly on the middle and high schools. We already know we don't need to worry additions at the elementary schools. Most of them have some capacity with some districting. To take care of our relief, we need to build elementary 14, and that's what we're going for this year. But with the middle schools, we have an alternate plan that we'll discuss and throw out there for thought, and that was to increase the capacity. Again, what I've done with the estimated FTE from the state, I've got 10,789, that we're going to look at those schools that can handle addition. I do have a couple of them, which are the 2-story middle schools, don't lend very well for making a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classroom wing hang off those buildings very well. And Victory Creek Middle School is pretty well landlocked. I don't have a place to really put an addition at that school. So those are my kind of shortcomers. But the other ones, what I've done is I've moved them up to what their core capacity will allow. Most of it's either based on the media center or the cafeteria at these schools. And so we've bumped them on up to basically 1325. Basically, they would all get about a 16 to 17 classroom addition. Of course, if we build additions, we do the sixth, seventh, eighth grade will get a math, science, English, and social studies classroom, plus one extra room. It could be a computer lab, it could be a foreign language lab, those type of things we could build into those additions. We would actually earn 84 classrooms doing this process from the state to help fund those additions. And to remind you, that was 96 if we built a brand new school that they would help fund. Any questions with the idea about going into additions versus new construction?
So like Riverwatch is already over the 1325, so we're possibly looking at redistricting there to, again, to even out
Yeah.
South and Riverwatch and however it would be done, because that's the max it can go to.
And again, the situation is we can go over 1325. When you cross that threshold, either the media center's got to be enlarged, cafeteria's got to be enlarged, and
Okay.
those type core areas are what kind of fixes that cap.
Right.
And with the state funding, additions, it would cover more than half, right?
With the additions,
If you're adding additions, because you're not really having to do parking lots and, or
No,
no?
I don't think
Sometimes
that's
you
right.
are.
I think
That's
it's
not
less
right.
money with additions,
I-
yeah.
jotted down a formula so I'll be able to talk through that.
Sometimes you have
Okay.
to
I'm
take
going to
away a
use
parking
the
lot to build.
existing elementary formula, which pulled out of the local facility plan book on the shelf. For one classroom in a brand-new building,
Mhm.
they allot us 1,800 square foot per classroom, per instructional unit. That covers the corridors, the restrooms, the cafeteria, the media center, and that 1,800 square foot. Roughly, one instructional unit at elementary school on today's or previous formula earns about $142,000 per unit. An addition for elementary school space at 750 square feet.
Mm.
So if I add one classroom to an existing building.
Because it doesn't count
I
in
don't-
the core, they say
That's
you
right,
already
we already
that.
have the core facility, so they don't give us any extra square footage for hallways and all that. We add a classroom to it. So it's
Gotta get
750
there.
square feet. So the value of that from the state is 60,000. So it's a little bit less than half of what we get for a brand-new school classroom compared to a single classroom addition. So that does tweak the formula a little bit. And again, as you see that we only earn 84 units of additions versus 96 classrooms in a brand-new school. So we actually will earn more units in the other formula for a new school than for an addition at a higher dollar value. Now, of course, we earn more value that becomes part of my construction need to weigh against everybody else in the state. But when you ask for the money, you take a bigger chunk out of that bank account at one time too, so.
So does this fall in line with the size middle schools that we've been talking about for a long time? I know we had in that first slide, it was 1,500.
What everything kind of dictates with the middle schools is the fact that you add the little blocks of 4 classrooms, so you have the 4 classrooms, the science, math, English.
Uh-huh.
So each classroom wing gets one of those equitably as you make that addition.
Okay.
When we started off with the first 3 schools, of course, they were smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we built Otwell, we went to the next version,
Mhm.
which had basically 4 of those modules down each hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to go back and add on to North, South, and Vickery Creek to put those extra classrooms on there to make the match with the Otwell, Riverwatch, Liberty plan.
Okay.
So we actually had done an addition to those schools already for 4 classrooms at each wing.
Okay.
So that's kind of one of the little things that kind of dictates how you do middle school. We can build as many or few classrooms as you want, but based on a kind of formula of how we've been using them. And of course, each middle school, as I've done the inventory, they're a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks have a lot more pull-out rooms. I don't think I saw a whole lot of folks said I use the plan just like it shows in the architectural diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Cover that with the high schools. What I did with the high schools, kind of took the worst case first and put all of our projected students in there. And of course, Central was my least worrisome school as far as being able to add capacity to, so they only got the remainder of the 2,181 students. And one thing you notice with my high school list, you won't see Forsyth Academy on there because the plan is That will become a program this next year.
Mhm.
So those 11 classrooms that are assigned come off my inventory from the state. So I'm an extra 11 classrooms short going into this plan cycle.
Okay.
Because those rooms
Because
aren't
it's not
counted because
considered a
it is
school.
not a school. The FD is not reported through Forsyth Academy anymore.
Got it.
Through their school.
All right? So that is one little tweak that was changed as we take the old plan to the new plan. But again, like I said, we'll earn 101 classrooms, which is pretty close to the 105 classrooms for new high schools in comparison to how many units we need there. And again, I have my 1,125 additional students we think we need, so you see that locally, I'll have to build 61 classrooms if we have a classroom for everybody per the state formula.
Mhm.
And yes, they plan for us to be over 45,000 students in the next, by 2016, 17.
Mhm.
I'm sure we will.
And then
Mhm.
just
Probably
follow
more.
up with our discussions about building new schools, keep the school sizes the same, or to increase our school sizes and make additions to those schools. This is one of the key pages we'll have to review and identify section number 1 very closely, which will tell us our range again. We understand there'd be no reason to go above 1,500 for elementary. Again, was kind of based on that Sawney Elementary and Primary. And we don't plan to increase the size of those schools. But if we do increase middle schools to 1,300 towards 1,500 in that range, and you always want to make sure you leave a little buffer in there, so you don't want to say 1,350 and then go, oops, we ended up with an extra classroom,
Right.
which we would not get credit for in the future.
Okay.
And then, of course, same for high school, that if we went from 2,100 to 2,500. And the other thing would be that area number 3, if for any reason we look at a program to where we say we'd have a 9th grade academy, I'd have to go for the high school area and redefine that we would have a school, say, just for 9th grade, and then
Mhm.
the other schools would be 9, 12, or any mix between those two.
So we just wanted to give you a quick overview as to what we've done so far since January. Tim and the Facilities Department have been very busy going through the numbers that he's just presented to you, talking about the instructional units, the curriculum needs, and the space. And then he's also looked at life cycle items too. And part of that is that we reviewed lists from middle and high schools, and he's currently collecting a list from elementary schools. And so we've also received online feedback that will end next Monday. And then we're also taking it to the superintendent advisory meetings too. We do have a district committee, and you can see the different departments that comprise that committee. And they've had one meeting where they have gone through and looked at the elementary and middle school list. We have a meeting in June where they will review the elementary school list, and then they'll also review the online feedback. And then what they'll do is that they will work for 3 hours to come up with recommendations to present to you in either June or July, so you can make some decisions about moving forward for the facilities plan. And then also, too, you'll see at the end of our presentation that we'll be asking for recommendations from the Board of Education today for things that you would like us to bring back to that committee to look at. So as I mentioned, we did the middle and high school plans, and the elementary will be complete in early June. And this is just a look on where we are with feedback online. We have just over 2,000 responses. And you can see we have about 34% students and 39% parents. We asked them, do you want to eliminate the trailers or build permanent classrooms? And 87% said to eliminate the trailers. Using the size of our elementary, middle, and high schools, we asked them if you were in favor of increasing the elementary schools, and 64% said no. We asked if you're in favor of increasing the middle schools and looking at the different sizes, and we based these sizes on how large we can go without increasing the core capacity. And 54% said to leave them at where they are, 32% said to increase them to 1,300, and 14% said go up to 1,500. And then at the high schools, we stopped too at the 2,600, because if we went over that, then we'd have to go to back to schools at Lambert and West and expand their cafeterias and their media centers. Now, that's something that if the Board of Education decides to do after reviewing all the input, then that's something that we can look at. But 58% of the respondents said they would like to keep the high schools at 2,000 as far as the building capacity. And then we wanted to see if they were interested in expanding schools or if they wanted to add on to schools. And 70% said they would like to add on to schools.
But they want the
But they-
smaller
but
numbers.
they
want
Totally
smaller
diametrically
numbers.
We're
opposed,
already
I mean,
over some of
Yeah.
those
Through this
numbers,
contract,
and then
they
if we add on, we'll be,
even more, that's it.
Right.
So they
So, I mean, if you
totally
combine-
went against what they just
Oh,
said.
But that's 'cause it's hard to-
The schools that are
when you
there,
do the
but they don't
survey,
want
it
any
is-
more
But they
kids.
don't want to
Right.
increase them.
Right, yeah, they-
it's not clear.
But
They
one
didn't
thing
use-
is that we had to go with the numbers for the buildings, and we know that we have over 2,000 students at the high schools, but this is for the state facilities plan, and so that's why we had to go with what the building is currently built at to house. And that's just us collecting input to bring back to you
And
guys
it's-
to make
But
a
your average
decision.
person's just not gonna understand that.
Mhm.
They're just, so they
What-
can
what
fill
was
this
the
in, but they
slide
don't
right
really know
above
what
that
we're
one?
Right.
asking.
Certain. That's the adding on to the existing schools.
Mhm.
So everybody wants to do that, but not add students.
Right.
Bigger band rooms and art rooms.
Mhm.
I'm with them.
And then we
And
looked
computer
at, for
labs, yeah,
classroom
they're-
additions above and beyond, how they would rank things, and this is currently how they rank them. Number 1 would be computer labs, CTAE would be number 2, media centers would be number 3, cafeteria would be number 4, band, chorus, and art are number 5, and athletics are number 6. And then we also asked for feedback on safety and then any additions above and beyond what we did not ask. And you see we have currently right now over 11,000 responses that we have to go through for safety and about over 700 for beyond that.
For question number 7, is there any way to pull just the students' response, seeing where they feel the need the room? I mean, I wouldn't think students would answer that they want more computer labs with bring your own technology and all these days. I wouldn't think that would be number 1. I was very surprised at that.
I can go in and try to see if we can pull that.
Okay. I'd just be curious that, because like I said, I thought they were,
I'd be curious on the students' response about school sizes, because they're the ones, I know when Darla and I have gone to North and looked at the crowding, and we'll hear, the time parents didn't all want to be redistricted, but from the student's point of view, when they're in a crowded cafeteria or a crowded hallway, they might have a different opinion, so I'd love to hear the kids' opinion on
Okay.
capacities.
I can look at that.
thanks.
And then, as I mentioned, what we're going to do is the district committee will come together and they will look at the curriculum program delivery, the capital outlay, and then any recommendations. And then we will bring them back to the Board of Education for you to make a decision. And then after that, we'll have final review and edits in the fall, deliver to the state, and then in spring, it will be approved. And then it will go into effect, and then we can start discussing the future funding options. And so right now, we wanted to see what areas you wanted us to investigate and look at and take to the district committee to review. We know that there was 2 recommendations for us to look at the North Cluster. And so we already have that on our list for things to gather input. Are there other areas that you would like us to look at?
I just had a question about career pathways. We get out of districts requests for kids that want to go to one school because they have, say, STEM or whatever. How much in the facilities plan, as I look through them, I could see one school might be doing a little more health-oriented, another one might be doing more art. Are the career pathways, for example, so not every school's, I can't have everything. But then we get to the point when all the schools are at capacity. If your school doesn't have your career path of choice, we're always going to be full, they're not going to really be able to do out of district. So how much is the career pathways going to have to do with integrated into the facilities plan as far as what gets done where?
I'm going to refer that to Dr. Hall because they're doing some research right now to bring back for the facilities plan.
We're actually doing a lot of realignment right now of what's offered at both the middle and high school level. In those instances where the schools are full, we typically do have an alternative through dual enrollment at Linear Tech. So we're making that a priority so that if a student does have that need, we can find either of these space or through dual enrollment they can go for free.
Okay, that's good to know.
The other part of that discussion too would be, are we looking at a career academy? Are we not going to do that? Is that part of the discussion at all?
We haven't looked for anything that I know of for a bond or anything with a specific academy, but we are looking at branding all 5 of our high schools with a specific focus, just as Central has STEM. We do something similar with healthcare, maybe sports and entertainment marketing, hospitality and tourism, working with our local areas. But in terms of one facility, we've not identified anything yet.
Okay. I'm not suggesting that, I just would like to
Is that
see the
something you
option.
want us to look at as a district committee?
Well, I like, and I went to the workforce committee that Valerie had, and it is very interesting with what we're doing, and that has not been part of the discussion, and there are other counties that have done that. But I almost like the approach that we're doing better, but I just kind of felt like it needed to be
Because
out
of the
there.
expense, it did come out of Propel. That was one recommendation
Right.
from Propel, that was something that we wanted to look at. With the innovation that we're doing with Siemens and corporations like Northside Hospital in the community at one specific school, we may find that this works just as well because we do have so many dual enrollment options to not be replicating. So it's
That
worked.
makes
I think it's
sense.
going to work just as well due to the budget constraints to
Yeah,
construct a
it's a
facility.
great suggestion.
The only other curiosity I have, and this is all about capital, is the human capital side of this M&O impact on additions versus new schools. Because we know they need extra principals and extra this. Is that so minimal that we shouldn't even consider that in the process of making that decision?
Well, that is why with the district committee, that's something that we will be looking at.
Okay.
Because if we do build a school or add on to the school, then there are things that come out of our operational costs that come back to our tax base. So it's not just our state funding and any other capital improvement funding such as a bond or SPOS, but it's also our taxes too, our operational funds that we've talked about.
But you're gonna have those expenses either way.
Well,
And it
with
could
new-
be less adding on, right?
It would
'Cause
typically
one person
likely
could
be
serve more.
less,
Mhm.
but it would be some increased cost because our allocations are based on FTE.
Right.
But in a case where you would have to have like one to serve an entire school, you might not have that added cost as a part of it.
I know it's so hard to look in the future, but we've always talked about having smaller schools like 1,100 in elementary schools and not going to 1,500, which blows my mind. But at the same time, I look at our county and you look at where some of the elementary schools are overcrowded, where in the world would you build another school? And there's just no land mass because it is so compact. So I just go back and forth with trying to do what's been in the strategic plans, that we have smaller schools, being practical about maybe it is better to add on to those schools. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, we looked at the survey and it was not a clear cut. We do not want bigger schools. They said that, but then they wanted to add on. So that leaves the board, or it leaves me anyway, as what direction we do. I just don't have a clear, I guess, read from the community exactly what they want. And I just don't know.
Well, I don't think from the survey it's a first survey, it's just an initial thing. They don't really understand the details where we're at. So I don't think, if they had been here and heard the explanation just now and then they did the survey, they might have had different answers because they would understand a little bit more. So
Well,
I
and you would
think
have
reading that cold, like when I read the question about what size do I want elementary schools, now I've been thinking about all this a lot. I've thought a lot about high school and a lot about middle, but I really hadn't thought about elementary because I didn't think that was something was really other, because we're planning on building a new one, but it's not something that I thought about. So in the middle of the survey, I was like, I really don't know. So I'm one of the 36 unknowns, and this is what I do. So people just doing that cold for the first time.
I understand that,
You
but what
know.
I'm saying is I would like to have more feedback.
I think
And
they
don't
need
know
more
how to get it
information to give us
make-
more qualified.
Exactly.
I think, yeah.
Well, because too, we're kind of asking them in a perfect world.
Right.
Right.
If we had all
exactly.
the money that we wanted to do, and that's what they answered, if it were in a perfect world, but we're not in a perfect world.
Mm-mm.
And so, I don't know how you ask either, but it would be good to know, had you rather pay this much more money and have this, or less money and have this? You know, you do see what I'm saying? It's
We're in different economic times now than we were in the
Yes.
heyday.
Right,
So
they
we have
know
to,
that
we have
adding
to
on is
look at more
cheaper.
fiscally
Yeah.
responsible
Well, I
choices.
don't know. Do people know that adding on is cheaper?
Well,
Do
because you
people
have to buy the
realize
land,
that?
you have to buy land, you've got to find a place. I mean, logistically, you just, I would think logically you'd figure that adding on is
And
cheaper than
it's
building new
one tool
schools.
that we are using. You can see we do have all the feedback from the schools, and the schools did work with their local school councils and their administration on collecting that, and that's why too we have the district committee, so we can kind of review it and see where do we want to go. And it may be something that we do need to spend some more time educating the community that, what does that really mean? You do want your schools added on, but that means that it needs to increase the size of your school. So obviously, that means we do have to educate them on that. So if that is a decision that you pursue, that you do want to expand the schools, And that tells us we'll just have to educate them and inform them as to why this is the right decision to make.
Well, even listening, we've all been trying to, I know I've been studying and listening to this and listening to Tim today. I learned a whole lot more, and it's not all black and white. It's
No.
really
No, it's
complicated.
very
So, I mean, we
complicated.
can teach it, but
Right.
unless you're Tim's head, you're not going to get all this.
One of the things that you'll be seeing come back through later, it's not part of this presentation, because we don't have a list of our projects to say, here's our tabulation priorities, but we're gonna come back as we finish the district committee, we say, these are projects we think need to happen, here's what we think the most urgent needs are to be priority 1, 2, 3, and here's the ones down here at 86, 87, 88. The good thing with the facility plan is, we can throw, and like I said, if we have 105 classroom need at high school, I can put all those in the plan. It's identified, it's a need. It's not a wish list type item, as we talk about some of the other things that have come out with our survey plans that would be strictly a local funded, and that depends where we are with local money, bond, SPOS money to pay for. So the nice thing is I can put all this in the plan and earn as much need against the state for us to be able to collect money from, but it has to be a true need for instructional space.
So that's kind of the difference between the facilities fund and then that additional funding for local projects.
And I know this is an impossible situation, but I also sit here, having grown up in DeKalb County in the Atlanta area, and you see schools built and then they have to be closed. And trying to plan ahead in a county like ours to meet the growth now, but not overbuild for 20 years down the road, where you're stuck with this huge building, especially a high school, just scares me to death. But there's no answer to it. You just have to make your...
Well, I think we keep seeking those answers, because this is a
Yeah.
5-year plan. That's,
Right.
that's kind of what we're doing, and this is more, I took it as reality, how we're really going to do something. This is a real plan, this is real
We
money
know
to the
what's gonna
state,
happen, yeah.
how we're really going to go ask for bond money, how we're really going to build schools. For us, we continue to look way out in the future past that, you know, looking at our crystal ball, if you would. And we have those experiences from DeKalb, both of us do, so you know, looking at innovative ideas like we got to see at the E-Solutions conference we went to. The superintendent from Joplin, Missouri, and they had a massive tornado come through there, wiped out all their schools. And he committed to opening the schools. This was in May when this happened. He committed to opening schools back in August, and they did it. And so looking at the innovation they uncovered that we may make use of in a different type of school. That's for us to seek out as we continue to work for the community, because they're not going to be at the conferences we go to look at the innovation and the change. I think that's for us to bring back to these committees as they put together the 5-year plan and hopefully come up with some of those thoughts, and then we have to study them.
Yeah.
Because that's really going to change how we look, and hopefully we can make it past this wave of students and not have that empty school syndrome at the end of this. That's all our desires, I think.
Yeah, and I guess that was my biggest concern about that north cluster. Looking out in the future, you know that's going to be a major commercial area, and it just, I can't see 3 schools trying to feed into that, but there again, that's for the committee to talk about. So, okay.
Good luck with that.
Yep.
Maybe we should have done money first.
Okay, and next we have Mr. Dan Jones, who's the man with the plan. Is he smiling?
We need some money.
I think he's smiling.
Maybe found 27 million like the cab did, right?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Wouldn't that be nice?
All right, Rick found this nice, bright, sunny picture for you. And you can name all the people on there if you'd like. But this is our first look at the 2014 fiscal year budget. It will start July 1, 2013, and take us through the next year. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go through the slide presentation. You've got a book that's got much more detail than I plan on going through. We'll go through as much of it as you want to. But my suggestion is we go through this evening, and then you take the book and go back and go through it. And if you got questions or something that we need to answer for you, just drop us an email or call us or come by. We'll be glad to do that. We're going to go through this evening, and then we'll ask for tentative approval next Thursday at the regular board meeting. And that will give us time to advertise the budget and go through that process. And also, hopefully by then, we'll get some final numbers. We don't have a state QBE allotment sheet yet. The governor just has signed the budget. And I've got a digest, but again, it's preliminary. It's not the final. So that's what we're working with, the digest. You know, this one could go up, it could go down, because they're still gathering information. But we'll go with what we got right now, and then that'll leave us some time to make some changes if we need to. This is an overall look. You can see compared to FY13, our revenues are up, and I'll go through that in just a second, about $13.6 million. And our expenses are up 10.8 million. And I'll highlight some of the reasons the expenses are up. I think we know most of them already. But right now, as we stand, this budget is in a deficit by $5,690,000 that we will have to cover. And to zero this out, we just showed that money is coming out of fund balance. There's other ways we can do this, and that'll be up for some discussion as we go through. But our local revenue and our state, you can see, and the percentages is we're about 47% local and about 53% state.
So that assumes we're going to get more tax money, bigger digest this year.
Yes,
That's that assumption.
Yes, ma'am. I'll cover that in just a second. The expenditure breakdown is, you know, we're again 89, 90% salaries and benefits, and just a little over 10% operations. And you can see that 72.25% is in instruction. The other areas, larger areas, are maintenance and operation, and transportation, and then school administration. Everything else is rather small. And you can see overall expenses are up about 4%. This gives you a picture of how this would look, and you can see much larger piece of it is instruction, and that's what we would expect to see. And then the other areas that I just mentioned, you can see the bigger slices of that. Again, graphically showing you salaries and benefits versus operations. 251 million is salaries and benefits, and 30 million is in operations. Start getting into some detail. Ad valorem taxes. Again, it's calculated at the current millage rate of 16.3, and this would bring in 124,733,000. Now, this is based on the preliminary digest that I've got, like I said. Right now, that's a $3.5 million increase. We did bump up intangible tax and real estate transfer because we are collecting more this year than what we budgeted for in 2013. We are making the assumption that that trend will continue. Interest income, we don't see that changing much. And then other local revenue, it's just, you know, we put in an amount trying to cover what comes in. QBE is up a good bit, 8.9 million. And the other pieces are basically the same as what we currently have. So overall, revenues are up 5.2%. We'll go back. You can see the projected gross digest and the exemptions. The exemptions are the part that we're not sure of. When she sent me the latest digest, the exemptions that are in here are less than they were last year, so I got a feeling that's going to change. I plugged in last year's, and it's not a huge change, about $600,000 if they do come in higher. But again, the current millage rate, the gross revenue will be $127 million. We have to pay the commission on that. It's $3 million, so that leaves us to $124 million that's plugged in at the top. The formula earnings from QBE, we have a summary. We don't have the detail. But the formula earnings are $139 million, and we, again, bumped up midterm earnings. Last year we had $4.5 million. We bumped that up to $5 million. So that gives us $144 million in state earnings that's up there under that category. This will show you a comparison of QBE. If you look at the initial 13 summary, because we're comparing the first look, the first QBE allotment sheet to the first one in FY14. And that's how you get the light comparison. And you can see that local fair share went up 427,000. And then our austerity, 44,000. Yeah, 427,000. Austerity reduction went up 688,000. Transportation is up 20,000, and we get a little more money for nurses, which is good to see, $121,000. And all those add up to the 8.4 million increase in state earnings. And what we don't have to show you is a detail of the programs as to where we earned the extra money. They haven't issued that allotment sheet yet. What we got was basically a one-line item, and that's what I used here for the comparison. And again, just to show you the picture of how revenues look. The changes in the budget on the expenditure side. Biggest thing is we're adding 80 teaching positions, 1 assistant principal, 1 clerical. And it's 82 positions that are at the school level. There's nothing in central office. And then we're adding 15 bus driving positions. We haven't added any bus drivers in several years. And with the growth in the student population, we're going to need to do something about that this time. So that's 97 positions, and that cost us $6.3 million. The other large area is, we've been talking about this, started last year, the increase in state health for the non-certified staff. It went up $150 a person per month. So that's $2.3 million. And teacher retirement, the employer match went up, and that's $150,000. So that's $2.4 million, and those equal almost $9 million in the increase in cost for 14. That covers general fund. I'm trying to see, make sure we got it all. And I'll go through something here in just a minute, but the slideshow, that's all of it. Debt service fund. This gives you a breakdown of the revenue that will come in. We're based on the digest, it's 18.6 million. Then again, we get intangible and real estate. We transfer money out of SPLOST 4 into debt service to pay bond payments. And you can see that we're going to have to take a little bit out of reserves to cover debt service. Hopefully the sales tax will come in a little higher. But we'll still have a fund balance in there at the end of the year, about 8.1 million. And that's what we need to do. We need to start building. Whenever we talked to the rating agencies this past week, that was one of the things they asked about, was we had to transfer some money out of general fund to cover bond payments last year, if y'all remember that. And we were trying to explain to them that we did increase the millage rate, and with the growth in the digest, we'd start building this reserve back up. So that's one thing that they want to see, that we're going to do that. I keep going the wrong way. School food service. This is their budget with local revenues. They look to have a little bit less this year, but it looks like most of it will be made up with federal increases. And their expenditures are $62,000 more than FY13, and they will have to pull a little bit out of their reserves, $120,000. Meal prices.
Do they have to keep a certain amount in their reserves too, Dan? The food service, or is that just an arbitrary number?
No, they get looked at by the Fed and the state, and they want them to have some money, but they don't want them to have too much. So
Okay.
And when we were building all the schools, when Susan was here, she was trying to keep enough in there
Right.
to cover the opening of those new schools.
Okay,
So that has dropped down some.
okay.
But the food prices that she's projecting, that Valerie's projecting for next year, are the same as this year. And there's a 6-cent increase for lunches and 3% increase estimated by DOE, which is subject to the consumer price index figures. So that's where she will generate some of that new federal money. And that's the end of the slideshow. There's not a whole lot of new stuff in this budget, other than the positions that we talked about, and also the increase in the health cost and teacher retirement.
Is that going to continue every year? Is there a certain percentage that's going to go up every year, like the teacher retirement?
The health, the classified health, we know is going to go up for the next 2 years,
Right.
$150 a year, till it gets to that, about the same level as the certified people.
Okay,
Then I don't think it's going to stop,
right.
the way healthcare costs are going.
Mhm.
Teacher retirement, that's something that's looked at every year, and they can adjust it as they need.
As their costs go up.
It could theoretically go down.
It could.
In perhaps 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
With the market going like it is, we would hope that at some point it would go back down.
Mhm.
Alrighty then.
You can go through each expenditure function, they're labeled here, and look at the detail that's in there. There's a couple of them that I'll point out for you. Maintenance and operation is an increase. You'll notice that when you start going through it. The big reason there is we're having to add a bunch of portables this year. That's the 2600 category. This budget has 55 portables in it, and that's an additional $1,341,000.
Does that include, is that just the cost of them or renting them, or does that include any water, electric, whatever you gotta do to?
Yeah, that's
do them?
everything
That's
to
the whole
get them set
picture.
up. And then I'll point out a piece that Bailey has to get the technology in there. Transportation, you'll see a couple of areas there. Their repairs and maintenance are going up $51,000. And he's got an explanation, but it's because the bus fleet's getting older. They were at about 5.5 years average age. Now they're pushing 8.5. And a lot of the buses are, I think he said there was almost 100 of them coming out from under warranty, that when some things went bad, warranty would cover it, but now we're going to have to cover it. One thing I want to point out at transportation, if you remember, there was legislation passed this time exempting school systems from the excise tax, and that's going to save about $130,000. So that's a good thing. And in technology budget, the new portables, there's $392,000 in his budget to cover the technology and everything it takes to get those wired and get them set up. And as you go through each area, the biggest thing you're going to notice is, again, the benefit cost has gone up. And the overall expenses are up $10.8 million, and revenues up $13.6 million. And as I pointed out, the salaries, benefits are almost $9 million of that increase. And then some of the things that I pointed out will make up the largest part of those others. And I know that's a quick look at it. There's just not a whole lot of changes in the budget. On the operations side, very little change. In fact, most departments kept everything as it was or less. And you can go through the details, like I said, and ask any questions that you need to. And I'll update you right quick on where we are with the 2005 bond refunding. As I said, we've We got our Moody's rating. They sustained what we had, which is very good. It's just a hair below AAA. And that's standalone was just on our credit. S&P should come in tomorrow, and we think that probably they will maintain the ratings also. Don't see why they won't. Next Thursday, you'll be asked to adopt the bond resolution. I think we got a copy of it that you can review. And then the bond purchasing agreement also. We'll have Bryce here to go over the numbers with you. The market took a little turn to the bad side. Hopefully it will recover, but we'll still have substantial savings. And we moved on. The POS was released last night. So that's a major step to get that done and get that on the street. So people can start looking at that, and hopefully the sale will go fine. But everything's on track, and looks like we'll have some savings there.
Good.
Dan's being a little modest, but substantial savings means approximately $20 million. So you consider whether or not that's minimal or whatever, or substantial. I think that's quite substantial.
It is.
Yeah,
That's
I
about
think so,
half of
too.
what we have to pay for the next year's bond payments. It's like $48 million.
Well, the way it's structured, these bonds are callable in 2015.
Right.
So we'll have a little bit of savings in the payment we have to make in August. And then there won't be any real savings for the rest of the year for 14. And then kicks in 15 when they call those bonds and reissue. And it's structured level savings so that you save about $2.5 million every year for the rest of the life of the bond. We're not extending the life of the bond. We're actually cutting it about a year or two.
Okay.
So those savings will be equalized throughout the remainder of it, which will also help our fund balance in our debt service account.
That's good. Okay.
Any questions I can answer now, or?
We'll call you.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's fine.
exactly.
I know you haven't had a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, just at the top picture, on the surface, I mean, it's a lot better than we heard back in January.
Oh, yes, yes.
And
much
so,
better.
I was happy to see that movement and encouraged that we can survive another year.
Yeah, well, we didn't take quite as much of a hit from the legislature this year. They were nice to us for a change. And hopefully the digest will grow. I mean, this growth here is 2.95, almost 3%. And as long as we can keep that, that's a good sign that things might be turning around. It's better than going the other way.
I'll be so glad when we don't have any more teacher furlough days. Maybe by next year we'll have enough to get rid of it. I want
And
to be
get control
positive
of the
about
benefit
that.
cost.
Huh?
Yeah.
And get control of
Benefits.
benefit costs. I'm
Benefits.
afraid that's going to
I
skyrocket
know.
still.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Dan.
Okay, on to action items. We have the adoption of
Future
the,
agenda.
future agenda items. I'm sorry, I always skip that, don't I?
Yeah, you don't want any
I don't
more
want
items.
to-
She lives in the moment.
That's right. Do we have anything for next
right
week
ahead.
or anytime?
I think for now, the plate's full.
I
Yeah,
think
plate's
so.
full.
I think we're good.
Okay. Now, action items. Adoption of the 2013-14 employee work calendars with Dr. Norton.
Thank you. We would like to recommend that the board approve the official 2013-14 employee work calendars as presented. We're basically asking you to look at the same number of days for every category of personnel that we had this school year. And all of those are attached. And our budget is based on those days.
It is recommended that the Forsyth County Board of Education approve and adopt the 2013-14 employee work calendars as presented.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Tom and a second by Ann. All in favor? Unanimous?
Thank you.
Okay.
Candy?
Okay, and now we have executive session for personnel issues, I believe.
So moved.
Second?
A motion by Ann and a second by Nancy. All in favor?